How likely is it that we'll get a NAFTA deal tonight that also includes Canada? We're hearing that a deal is imminent, but not much detail beyond that.
Exactly. Well, with NAFTA, it's never over until it's over, as they say in sport. And we are hearing especially from the Canadian and U.S. sides, and Mexico has weighed in as well, that a deal is imminent, that a deal is likely by the end of the day. There's just a few sticking points that have to be cleared. As you mentioned, Peter Navarro, the White House trade advisor, he's been very optimistic. And there's a lot of momentum in the United States to get this deal done. Businesses are very worried about their supply chains, especially between the U.S. and Canada, as well as to Mexico. They've certainly made their thoughts known to the White House. I think Canada, really feels a lot of urgency to get a deal done. But as always, and as has been the case for over a year, just a few kind of things that neither side really wants to give up on.
What are the major hurdles then in terms of, as you say, there are issues that both sides are very stubborn on at the moment?
Yeah, I'd say some of the ones on the Canadian side would be that they really want to get a free pass from the United States to not be subject to steel and aluminum tariffs, saying that those tariffs and those quotas are something that the U.S. wants to put on in the name of national security, and Canada reasons that as a strong U.S. ally, it shouldn't be subject to those tariffs. The U.S. wants to get access to the Canadian dairy market, which has some pretty high barriers, protective barriers. And I think the U.S. negotiators really feel that because the U.S. can threaten auto tariffs against Canada, that they may get their way, because really those tariffs would be so ruinous to the Canadian economy, probably pushing Canada into a recession, that it's kind of the last-minute thing that the U.S. can hold out. President Trump has certainly talked about this. He talks about it being the mother lode, and that, in the end, is probably what will push Canada to get a deal done, hopefully tonight.
Roz, on Sunday, the World Trade Organization, the WTO, the International Monetary Fund, and World Bank issued an emergency call for international trade reforms. Now, they're all going to be meeting soon, the WTO having a big meeting, and then, of course, IMF, World Bank in a couple of weeks. Is that what's behind this unusual joint call from all three of these bodies at once?
I think a lot of it is about President Trump, but it's not all about President Trump. We've definitely had the U.S. Or President Trump saying more than once, including in a Bloomberg interview a month ago, that he's prepared to pull out of the WTO. And basically, the Trump administration and its America First policy has been upending the world order in many ways, up to and including trade and the WTO. But I think these groups, the IMF, World Bank, they're also looking at the modern economy, looking at e-commerce and wondering how they can best be positioned to have meaningful regulations and a meaningful trade structure. Given that, they've talked about the slow pace of reforms. And, if you remember that the predecessor to the World Trade Organization, GATT, we used to call it the General Agreement to Talk and Talk. I mean, these trade groups, they just, change is very slow, change is glacial, and I think that the leaders of all the bodies worry that without responding to a rapidly changing economy, they risk becoming obsolete, and maybe it won't be just Trump threatening to pull out; it could be other countries as well. So, really a need to look at those agreements and look at how those trade pacts operate, and maybe do a bit of a refresh on an agreement that's been around since the mid-1990s.